Hi, and welcome to Transparent with Tina. I'm Tina Marx, your host. Today's guest knew at 5 years old that he was an entrepreneur. He's going to share his story and how he founded Building Your Network, which is his podcast, and also Guerrilla Podcast, which teaches you how to build your podcast from the ground up. He's been featured in Entrepreneur Magazine as well as Forbes. Up next, Travis Chappell. Welcome, Travis. I am so excited to have you here.
Yes, man, Tina. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
You are a true entrepreneur, and I was listening to a lot of your story, reading, listening to videos, and everything. So, as we do in my show, we always start from the very beginning. And for you, it started at 5 years old. You knew when you were 5 years old that you wanted to be an entrepreneur. I mean, that's a pretty early start. So why don't we start there and your story of making money? Because you started making money at 5 years old and you had a business idea. So let's start off with that.
Yeah, sure. And I feel like the entrepreneurial itch is something I've always had. And the way I kind of define that is basically a desire to make money combined with the inability to listen to authority. So I think that was just kind of always innate within me. And I wasn't like a rebellious kid and getting in a bunch of trouble or anything like that. But if I had genuine questions about like why I was supposed to be doing something and I couldn't get a straight answer on that, that's what frustrated me. And so I didn't really mesh. Like a lot of my authority figures just kind of clashed with them fairly often when they didn't have a good response to that question. So yeah, when I was a kid, just
I
wanted
want
to
stop you right there because I think that's very interesting because a lot of people, parents, teachers would say that's a troublemaker. And that's not necessarily true. So parents that are out there listening to this and watching this. Really, you might want to pause for a moment when your child is behaving like that and recognize that he or she is thinking outside of the box. And that's actually a good thing, because, we're not machines here. You encourage people to think outside of the box. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to ask yourself why as well. Like if you don't have a good answer for your kid when they ask you that, maybe just kind of sit there and be like, what? Well, why is it a bad idea for them to do this? Is this just because my parents told me this was bad and this is kind of what I think is bad and it's not even something that I ever came to the conclusion of? You know what I mean? I think a lot of parents just get really defensive when their kid asks why. So they just say, "Oh, because I said so." You know what I mean? And just like, okay, well, that's
what I heard.
Not really a great answer. You know what I mean? That doesn't help them. That doesn't help them cultivate curiosity or cultivate reason or thinking or critical thinking for themselves. That just says like, okay, well, I guess I'll do whatever people tell me to do. And that's how they go throughout the rest of their life.
Well, so, and that word curiosity, I've brought that up several times because what I heard along the way that, when somebody is trying to find out their purpose and their passion and because I'm a coach. Okay. So some people will say to me, well, I don't know what my purpose or passion is. My question is to them, what are you curious about? Right. Mm-hmm. That leads you in the right direction of what your passion and your purpose is going to be. Right. If you're not curious, you've kind of stepped outside of the game, right? You're not in the game until you're curious.
Yeah, I agree. And curiosity is really what I think is a kind of a hallmark of entrepreneurship, to be honest. It just helps you continue to cultivate and ask questions where people might not be asking questions, which allows you to fill needs that aren't currently being filled, which is kind of what entrepreneurship is all about. So I just kind of had that from when I was a kid. And I remember my sister had this Easy Bake oven, which I'm sure you are familiar with. Yeah. And at the time, she was like 18 months older than I was. So I always wanted to do everything that my sister did. But my parents ended up going and getting me like the little boy version of an Easy Bake oven, which was basically like this little oven that you could, you get these little metal molds and you pour this liquid in them and then you put them in the oven, you get them out and they're insect molds. So you like pull it out and you have a little rubber insect that you can make different colors or whatever. And so I'd take those to school and sell them to the other kids in line at like when we were getting ready to be picked up and stuff. So that was kind of my first
How old were you then?
I was probably second or third grade or something like that. Maybe third or fourth grade. It was somewhere in there, between 7 and 10 ish, somewhere like that. And so that was kind of, when I look back, it seems so obvious that was just something that was kind of innate, because that wasn't really anything that my parents told me to do or encouraged me to do or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I will say, when I did show those things, they kind of helped kind of cultivate, give me opportunity to continue working. So when I was growing up, it was just like, whenever I wanted to buy something, my parents wouldn't just go buy it for me. They would say, well, there's 2 acres full of weeds out there. Go start weeding the yard, or, do something to earn the money. Go out and work in the yard, or mow the lawn, or do something. Right. So this kind of helped cultivate that, as I'd make $5 an hour, $6 an hour, or whatever it was. And I would just go out there. And, sometimes when I was a teenager, me and my friends would be out there for 7, 8, 9 hours on a Saturday, just like working and hula hoeing weeds and raking them and burning them and all this kind of stuff. And really, really kind of cultivated that. But at the same time, I grew up in a really strictly religious kind of a bubble community of sorts when I was growing up, like literally from the time that I was kindergarten all the way through my senior year of college. It was all done on the same campus. So I walked, like where I got my diploma from college was the same exact campus I got my diploma from kindergarten. And so it was kind of an interesting, unique way to grow up in terms of the perspective on money, because it was very highly, obviously, discouraged to chase money in that type of a culture or setting. And, that's the bad thing. You don't want to chase money. You're just, go into ministry and stuff. And so I actually went to college for going into the ministry. So the unique thing is, like, had some entrepreneurial tendencies, but I always muted them and kind of suppressed them, because I knew that I was going to be in ministry when I grew up. And obviously eventually ended up not doing that and going ahead and moving into my, more natural wanting to be wanting to be in entrepreneurship. So, but yeah, so that's kind of a brief overview.
You also mentioned, though, when you made the money, your parents also had you put part of it in a saving and then part of it in a giving. Now, was the giving part tithing to the church?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
So I think that's really important, because you can make a lot of money, but unless you learn how to save, and, I completely believe in tithing, whether it's a charity, anything that you really believe in, it's all about giving back.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you don't learn that early on, I mean, it's very easy to go off into the ditch. So I think that was magnificent that your parents taught you that, and also, the whole part about the religious. And do you think that helped guide you, being from a religious background?
I think that I think it's like every childhood. I think that it had its pros, and I think that it had its cons. Cons being that my mindset around money and entrepreneurship and chasing my dreams was really completely skewed and messed up, and I had to work through that a lot, and still am working through that in some senses. But pros would be stuff like I started doing public speaking when I was 12, because I thought that I was going to be a preacher when I grew up. I thought I was going to be a youth pastor or a pastor or evangelist or something like that. So when I was 12 in the summer, I went to preaching camp for the first time, which is basically like a college level homiletics course that they do in a week. And you go to class all day in the middle of the summer to learn how to preach, and you stand up at the end of it and you give a sermon. And so first time I really stood up and started speaking in front of people, I was 12, and I kept doing that throughout junior high, kept doing that all throughout high school, because again, I thought I was going to be in front of people all the time. And so in college, I kept doing that. Took all the homiletics classes, the sermon preparation classes. It taught me a lot about how to build a speech, and we didn't call it a speech, called it a sermon, but still a lot of the same fundamentals, same principles. And I got a lot of time. Like when I was 15, I spoke to our church, and we had a really large church. When I was 15, I spoke on a Wednesday night service. It wasn't like Sunday morning crowd, but there's still 1,500, 2,000 people or so in there. When I was 15, spoke in front of them. And so there's a lot of pros in that sense. I learned a lot of communication abilities. I grew up pretty fast. Like I didn't, when I graduated college, I got engaged at 20, graduated college at 21, got married at 21, bought my first house at 21. And so I had all the responsibilities of being a husband when I was 21, and had bills to pay and a real mortgage and insurance and all those things that were my responsibility. So I think that was another kind of a pro, but a little bit of a con. You know what I mean? I didn't get to do a lot of the same stuff a lot of early 20 somethings get to do and experience. But I think it also kind of put me on a different kind of like a it's kind of like the moving sidewalk at the airport, right? It's just
Mhm.
like you're just on a little bit of a faster path because you had to grow up faster than other people
Exactly.
did. So
And
and
that's a
combine
huge
that with the
advantage that you learn to
communication.
do public speaking. And public speaking is
Sure.
one of
Yeah.
the greatest fears everybody has. So
Right.
you to be speaking in front of 1,500 people at 15 years old. I mean, talk
Yeah.
about facing your fears, because I mean, that's how we get ahead is by, so whether you were kind of forced to face your fears, right? So by the time you're
Sure.
in your 20s, I mean, it's a whole nother set of fears, being married, moving into that, but your life certainly set you up for that. And I do believe that the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, does bring you exactly what you need at the right time to move forward. It's up to us to recognize that. We can either embrace it and face the fear and move forward, or we can, shy away from it, which, it only gets presented over and over again. So here you are, you're engaged, you're married, you're only in your 20s. What now? What business did you start?
Yeah. So I, coming out of college, basically realized I graduated, I got my degree, I double majored in Bible and church ministries. And then after I graduated, basically just realized I don't want to be doing this. And the only things that I had were my degree, which was pretty much useless. It's already fairly useless to have a purely ministerial degree like that, Bible or church ministries. But then you combine that with the fact that the college I went to was unaccredited. It was even more useless than a regular degree would have been. And so I didn't really have anything to fall back on in that sense. And during college, the job that I was working was door-to-door sales, and I had done pretty well with that. And so that was kind of what I did right out of college, because I just didn't, that was my only skill set. I knew that if I went and got like just a regular job, not based on a degree and not based on a sales thing, I would be making like 35 grand a year. Whereas in door-to-door, I pulled 100K the first year that I did it full time, just knocking on doors and working 20 hours a week. So I knew that it wasn't like, if I tried to go a different career path, I would have had to, make $45,000 or $36,000 or something. And so I was like, well, this sales thing seems to be pretty lucrative. Let's try this for a while. And then after doing it for a year and a half of like full time, I was just like, you know what? I don't think this is the path either. I'm having a good time. The people I was working with were really cool. We had a lot of fun. It was kind of like my quote unquote college years, except for that I wasn't getting in debt. I was actually making pretty good living and making six figures at 22 or whatever. But on the weekends we would hang out, we'd party, we would, go hang out at different people's houses or go on trips, like weekend trips. Like it was just a lot of fun. And it almost was like a year that was necessary for me. I let everything go. Like I always played basketball my whole life. I played basketball in college, and I was always super disciplined in terms of like my exercise and playing sports. And so that year I didn't do much of that. I actually gained like 50 pounds. I was just doing whatever I wanted, but it was doing whatever I wanted for the first time ever in my life. And as I look back, I think it was necessary for me, and it taught me a lot of different things. And I was able to learn a lot of different lessons that year. So, but by the end of the year, I started realizing like, okay, I need to get my health back in check. I need to, really think about is if this is the career path I want to be on. And it just wasn't. When I fast forward and looked at like 32-year-old Travis, I knew that I didn't want to be doing the same thing as 22-year-old Travis was doing. And I was like, well, if I'm going to change at 32, then I'm going to have to change right now so that my trajectory puts me on a path to where I actually want to be when I'm 32. So I don't just wake up accidentally and be like, oh, I'm 32 and I'm still doing this door-to-door thing, so.
Where was that instilled in you, Travis, or was that innate, that looking forward? Because I know that up until the last 5 years, I never did that. I never said, well, where do I want to be in 3 years? Or where do I want to be in 5 years? I mean, I really was being led by my circumstances. I was not living an intentional life. I was more hoping and praying instead of putting the plan in place. And I think, and I've shared this before, I think a lot of the reason that I did that was because if I couldn't figure out from A to Z where I wanted to be in one sitting, if I couldn't figure out exactly, then I would just trash the idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know 100% if that was innate or it's something trained in me through like the unique thing about growing up in a school like that I did, it was pretty small. My graduating class was 38 people, and we were the largest, and I think still to this day, the largest class to ever graduate from that school.
Wow.
And like I said, it was 38 people. So I kind of did everything. I played sports. I was, captain of football and basketball, and I was on Bible quiz team, and I played in chess tournaments, and I sang in large and small ensembles, and did all, like, we played the guitar and like there's just so many things that I did. And I think it taught me a lot about that if you don't show immediate expertise in something, that's okay. It just means that you have to work harder at it and envision a future version of yourself where you're having fun doing that thing and you're actually really good at it. And I think that maybe played into that like looking into the future and deciding what I wanted. I think that's probably part of it as well. But
and how did you learn that? I mean, just what you said. Was that learned? Was that passed down from your parents? Was it something that you saw, read about, witnessing somebody else? Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't remember. I feel like I'd always just kind of, I always wanted to be the best at whatever I did. I was extremely competitive. And I know that that's something that's definitely natural, but also my family was always pretty competitive growing up whenever, just like dumb things, right? Like playing board games or whatever. We're all pretty competitive and stuff. And so I think that was just cultivated more and more when I started playing sports a lot, which probably spilled over into all those other areas of my life. Is like, if I'm going to do something, I want to be really good at it. I don't want to just like do something and be just mediocre. Like it just wasn't interesting to me.
Right. And you were willing to put in the time and dedication, whereas a lot of people don't.
Yeah, sure.
If you're not good at it right off the bat, you know, they kind of trash it. And then you spend your whole life just trying one thing after another and not getting good at anything. You're like mediocre at a lot of different things, right?
Right.
So it's really important to get good at one thing.
Yeah, which is why, which might be a reason why I started looking into the future and stuff, because in order to decide if you want to work hard at something, you have to decide how bad you want that thing, because everything's difficult. If you want to get good at anything, it's going to be difficult. So you have to be able to look into the future and say, does this matter to me? Like, do I care about being good at this? Do I care about having success in this area? And if the answer is no, then you probably don't want to waste a lot of your time getting really good at it. If the answer is yes, then there's not much I'm not willing to do to get to that point. You know what I mean? Right.
Exactly. So you host two different podcasts. One is called Building Your Network. Okay, which I want to actually talk about that one first. So let's talk about that.
For sure.
How did you come up with the idea?
So this was after the year I decided I didn't want to do door-to-door anymore. For the first time in my life, I'd ever dove into personal development. I was never that kind of a guy in terms of like reading and audiobooks and listening. I did not enjoy those types of things. And so the first time in my life, I dove into personal development, came across podcasts, started becoming a big consumer of podcasts because I enjoyed the audio medium better than reading. And after a while, I was just like, you know what, I think I could do one of these things. I think that would be fun. You know, I think that I'm decent at communicating. I think that I would learn a lot. I think that this would be a really cool way to make a living. It checked all my boxes, right? It gave me time freedom, gave me financial freedom. It gave me location freedom, independence, all the things that I really wanted. And then also helped me to build a network. Because at the time I was pretty much starting from scratch, having grown up the way that I grew up. When I left that idea of going into ministry, not that people were rooting against me. Some definitely were, but I think the majority of them were just very neutral. Just like, okay, well, you're not doing the thing that we trained you to be doing. So now just kind of like, good luck. We don't really care type of a thing. So
when was this? When did you, is this when podcasts were, I'm trying to
this was 2016.
26. And when did, they've been around a while, but how long has it been? Like, when would you say they really caught on? Like everybody's like now listening to podcasts.
Yeah, I would say probably a year or two before that is when they started getting a lot bigger. So like in 2011, 2012, I want to say there was 2,000 to 3,000 podcasts that existed. Okay. And then by the time I started mine in 2017, it was like 500,000 podcasts that existed. Ooh. And now there's over 1 million. I think there's a big explosion to go from 3,000 or 4,000 up to 500,000 in that, 3-4 year time period right there between 2012, 2016, 2011, 2015, somewhere in there is from the data that I know. I think that would be about that time. Right. But also, the sooner you can do it, the better, because it's getting more and more saturated every day. But yeah, so I at that point was just like, I think this would be a pretty cool path. I need to grow my network. I don't know anybody, I didn't know anybody that had made $1 million, let alone have a relationship with them. I never met somebody that was a millionaire, you know what I mean? Like, let alone be able to call them up and ask them a question. And I knew if that was the path that I wanted to go down, I wanted to get to know people who'd been down that path so they could, so I could like learn from them and get to know like their mindset and how they operated and stuff. So the networking thing just kind of came out of, I would like to say it was a lot more strategic than it was. It was basically just like, what am I going to talk about? The first thing I thought of was sales, because that was the only thing I'd experienced in was door-to-door sales, and I was pretty good at it. So I was like, okay, well, I'll do the sales thing. But I'd go and search it in iTunes and find 3,000 podcasts on just how to sell and stuff. And I was like, well, and not to say, by the way, like if something's saturated doesn't mean that you can't be successful in it. It just means it's going to be more difficult to be successful in it. Mm-hmm. And I knew at the time, I was like, look, I'm a 24-year-old guy that's like, I have like a couple years in this experience in this thing. I think I'm pretty good at it, but there's so many more people that are way more qualified to do this. And all these other limiting beliefs came into my mind, but it coupled with the fact that it was really saturated. And I was like, okay, but why am I pretty good at this? Why do I think that I've had success in something like 100% commission door-to-door sales? Most people try it and then a month later they quit. Right. So why did I see success where other people might not have? And the answer to me was always like, I surrounded myself with the people who were better than I was, and I got around them as much as I possibly could, and learned as much as I could from them. So the second answer was like, okay, networking, let's do this thing. And I was like, but there's got to be an equal amount of saturation. And when I went and searched the term, it just was, nobody was talking about it. It was like it was a super blue ocean that I was like, okay, well, I think this could be the thing that I just jump in and start talking about. And then, like I said, it just kind of became this feedback loop where it was just like, I'm getting guests and I'm asking them how to network better and build relationships better. And then I'm using a lot of those things to go get better guests. And then the better guests that I talk to, they're giving me better tips. And I use those tips to go get better guests. And then it just kind of became this thing that kind of started snowballing on itself and built up the Build Your Network brand the way that it is today.
Right. Okay. Can you give us a couple tips of that you've learned in networking, like just for our viewers to like kind of get started?
Yeah, 100%. The first thing I would say, one of the biggest lessons I learned came from this book from Adam Grant called Give and Take. Mm-hmm. And basically in the book, he goes over 3 different types of reciprocity styles. And you have givers, you have matchers, and you have takers. Givers, fairly obvious. You're a person that gives without expecting anything in return. Takers, you constantly take, you're not willing to give, you're very protective, you're, somewhat selfish. And then matchers are people who are willing to give, but only if they have something of similar value that comes back to them. And I up to that point, I was kind of naturally a matcher. I was more of a transactional, like, let's do business. Let's make a deal. That's just kind of my natural tendency. And then I started realizing that was just a way. Like that was not the way to get the job done, because if you're a matcher, you're always going to have unrealistic expectations that you're casting on other people, and you're just going to end up with more burned relationships than you are good relationships. And then through that's the studying that they did with Give and Take. And Adam Grant is I think 7 years in a row now the Wharton School of Professor, top-rated professor or something like that. He's written 4 bestseller. Like he when he writes a book, it's not just like here's my ideas. It's like well thought out, well researched, documented. Yeah. 40 pages of index notes at the end of it type of a thing. So they did a really interesting study that basically looked at the success ladder of life and where givers, takers, and matchers end up on that success ladder. And so when you think about it, the first thought that I had was like, okay, takers probably at the top because they're just taking. They're just like, you know what I mean? Like they'll do whatever it takes type of a thing. And then, when I started figuring out, and that tells you
I
how.
I think they'd be on the bottom, but
yeah, when I started going through it, I was like, okay, the way that I'm looking at this is completely, wrong. And so when I looked at it, givers were at the top, but givers were also at the bottom. So there were givers at the very bottom of the success ladder. There's givers at the top of the success ladder, and then matchers and takers kind of filled out the middle area there.
Okay.
And so the book is basically a discovery of like why are givers at the top, and then it gives like real examples of takers and matchers and givers and different reciprocity styles in life, and then towards the end of it, kind of goes into like how to make sure you're a giver at the top and not
the one at the bottom.
Yeah, right. So very, very interesting book, and it totally flipped my mindset. And then I read this other book from Gary Vee at the time called Ask Gary Vee, and one of the things he talks about in there is how in every single one of his relationships, he tries to always offer an over-exaggerated amount of value in the relationship. He always tries to bring at least 51% of the value to every relationship that he has. And if you look at the majority of people he has relationships with, even coming down to all the people who follow his stuff but have never met him, it's a disproportionate amount of value that he offers to the lives of other people. And I started realizing that this wasn't just something that was a better way to live life in terms of just being more generous and kind and caring to people. Like that's just a better way to go about living life to begin with. But it also actually ended up helping you get to where you wanted to be
for business.
And,
exactly.
Yeah. So I really started looking at it differently. And so all that to say that my very first thing that I would say to people in terms of how to build better relationships is become a giver and learn how to add value to the people that you can, like to the people that you're meeting in any way that you can.
And being of service. And you had said earlier on about not chasing money, and I had Jeff Fenster on here a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about that too. I mean, just in a law of physics, okay, whenever you chase something, okay, you go forward, that person or that thing is going to go back, So, so when you give, it's just based on one of the universal laws, which I completely agree upon. And, it's like, instead of thinking what you can get out of the situation, how more can I serve? And like you said, bring more value. So, yeah.
And it's just that, like, if you make that your goal, then just like Zig Ziglar said, if you help enough people get what they want, you can have everything in life that you want. And it's just so true, but only if you're actually focused on helping people and not focused on helping people for the sake of getting things.
Of getting it, right.
That's when you move into that match or reciprocity style where people are going to get burned out doing business with you, like and you're just going to be upset a lot. You know what I mean? Like when you do something for somebody and you have this non-verbal agreement that you think took place in your mind but was never agreed to, and that person doesn't return the favor within a reasonable period of time in your mind, now all of a sudden you start holding grudges, you start resenting people, you start talking crap on people behind their back, you start spreading rumors. Like it just is an insidious disease that starts to spread into every area of your life and make you really skeptical of helping people and making sure that if you help this person, you're going to get some. And by the way, that doesn't mean that you just and that's one of the differences between a giver that ends up at the top and a giver.
I was just going to say that's the difference, because when you're giving to get, that's the one that's at the bottom. When you're giving just to be at service and to add value, from, coming from a very pure, authentic, genuine place, that's, you get what you put out. So if you're coming from authenticity and genuine and being, gracious, and that's exactly what you're going to get back. But like you said, you're keeping score in your head otherwise, right? You're keeping score, and that's where the resentment and the expectations and all of that. And if they fall short,
Yeah, you have those nonverbal agreements with people where like they didn't sign anything, you didn't sign anything, but you're just assuming that they're going to do something for you because you did something for them. And like that, like to me, whenever anybody reaches out to me and says something where it's like they're already implying that they're going to want something from me, I don't take the favor. Like I don't want your favor if it comes with an attachment or a clause at the bottom that says like, oh, but if I do this for you, you're going to have to do something for me. Like I don't keep it. I don't want it. You know what I mean? Like that's not how it works. Like that takes the altruism out of the favor, which turns it into not being a favor. Like
you just don't engage with people like that. You don't. Yeah. Because now you're part of that energy.
And so one of those other things that makes it one of the givers at the top is that it encourages givers to examine different relationships in their life and try to think through after a while if that person is a taker, and not allowing that taker to take advantage of them to a certain extent. So he actually recommends like switching reciprocity style with takers to being more of a matcher in those situations where if somebody's just reaching out, you're taking a bunch of time and helping them, and then nothing ever happens with it, and they're always just like take. He just says like, okay, well, you have to be willing at those times just to be like, no, you got to learn how to say no to some people and just say, no, I can't do that anymore. Or like, this isn't working out. Or you have to be one to draw the line somewhere is basically what he's saying, or else you're going to be one of those givers that just gets walked on all the time.
Absolutely.
People just take advantage of you. And at the end of the day, that's their responsibility. You have to understand that that's their personal responsibility, not your personal responsibility to help them. And again, this is after a pattern of taking, right? This isn't on an initial contact or whatever. This is after a pattern of taking has definitely shown itself to you. You got to switch to more of a matching reciprocity style with some of those people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it can be a disadvantage of you to be a taker without having boundaries. And if you have the boundaries, then it's a very healthy place to be. Otherwise, it's just as unhealthy as being just a taker as well.
Sure.
So again, everything is balanced. So, I had gone to a therapist in my 20s, and she had said to me, because I've always been a giver and I did get taken advantage of. And she goes, Tina, nobody is watching your tower, like in a watchtower. She goes, you need to like have somebody up there watching your tower all the time. So got to
use that no word every once in a while.
Exactly. Because you're not a better person if you're constantly saying yes, because if you're saying yes and you're building resentment, then what's going to happen? You're going to end up being like passive aggressive or just aggressive.
Exactly. Holding resentment. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where all that comes from. Exactly.
And the interesting thing about saying yes is that every time you say yes, you're saying no to something else already. Like you can't get away from saying no, but if you're saying yes to the wrong things, then you're probably saying no to the wrong things as well. You're saying yes to all these other people's agendas. You're saying no to your personal responsibility for being a better father or business partner, or you're neglecting these other responsibilities that are actually your personal responsibility because you can't be okay with telling somebody no. And so you got to be willing to start drawing those
and where does that come from? That usually comes from being a people pleaser. And why are we people pleasers? Because we're not okay with ourselves, because we need that validation. So, I mean, I think everybody has gone through that. I mean, including myself, but I am there now. I say no. And it's like, I was just sharing this the other day. It's like, we've been taught to believe that if we put ourselves first and we think of ourselves first, we're selfish. That couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, you need to put yourself first. Otherwise, you have nothing else to give and share and add value to other people's lives, whether it's being a mother or it's being a sister or a partner, business partner, whatever it is. You put yourself first. That's not being selfish. That's actually the best thing that you can do for yourself and everybody else around you. Okay. So let's talk now about your world-class podcast. Tell us what that's about.
Yeah. So World Class, actually, we had to put on a furlough recently. COVID kind of messed up our plan. So we launched at the beginning of this year, like literally 2 weeks before COVID hit and quarantine happened. The goal with the show was to interview world-class performers, like not just in the entrepreneurship space. Build Your Network is it's a top 25 business entrepreneurship podcast. It's been in the entrepreneurship top charts for over a year in Apple. It's very much geared toward entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But World Class was meant to just be like general help for people that are interested in education. We were going to be talking to a lot of people that were even outside of the business world. But the idea behind it was to do all of those in person and to do it along in a YouTube channel and stuff like that. So we decided, we were like, okay, we could do this on Zoom, but at the end of the day, we started it to do it in person. So we were just like, you know what, to stay, true to the reason that we started it, we decided, probably like 4 or 5 months after we launched, a couple months ago, we were like, all right, well, it's about that time. We gotta just say no for now. Again, no for now.
Some things just don't translate the way you want it to on Zoom.
Yeah,
it's got to be done in person. So, okay. 100%. So let's talk about your Guerrilla podcast, because, we're talking about how to build a podcast. Now you're telling us that I did not realize that 1 million, and here's funny. Here's something funny. It's not funny actually at all. But when I heard that, I'm like, my first thought was, I wish I didn't hear that. There's 1,000 podcasts out there, and I'm sure a lot of people, because I mean, it does. You're like, oh gosh, I'm not even going to start that, because how am I going to compete? But the one thing that you said earlier, and I know to be totally true, is that, nobody has reinvented the wheel. Everybody has said it before, but not everybody is you. And that's the difference. Everybody's written a book on the same subject. Everybody's doing a podcast, but there's only one you out there. And you know what? So you could be doing a podcast on the same thing I'm doing, Travis, but you know what? My tongue is different than yours. My animation, everything about me is different than you. And that's why we're going to attract different listeners. Okay. So tell us about Guerrilla Podcast, because you actually helped somebody build their podcast from ground up, correct?
Yeah, so we help entrepreneurs specifically build a podcast that can profit in the future. So we take on all the production work. We help with some coaching and some advice on where to set your show up, what direction to set your show up. But then we also take on the bulk of the heavy lifting and the work. So if you're a busy entrepreneur, you're already running 7, 8, 9-figure business, you don't have time to like worry about what a media host is or how to get your show on iTunes or Spotify. So we just kind of take on the bulk of the editing, the production, the show notes, the intros, the outros, the scripting, the music, like all of the production back end of starting a podcast. Yeah, right. You don't think about it until you actually get into it. But yeah, we take on all of that and we go through and help people launch effective and successful shows.
Travis, do you also help them get the guests on the shows?
So that is not something that we do with Guerrilla Podcast, but this new software that we just launched is called Guestio. So guestio.com, and it is essentially a marketplace where creators can go to find guests for their shows. And so if you're listening to this past November 1st, it will have already been launched, and you can go check out a ton of. You can go look at a marketplace of a bunch of guests that you can book on your show. If the high level ones will be a little bit pricier, but you can have direct access to them, not have to wait months to hear back or go through layers of gatekeepers. So it makes it a little bit easier for the guesting process. We built some cool features in there, like a downloadable media press kit, so you don't have to worry about exchanging emails back and forth for bio links and all that kind of stuff. It's all taken care of within the back end of the Guestio site, and it's all 100% free as well.
Wow! Did you say that you create the media kit?
Yep. So when you go in there and input your information when you set up your account, it will turn it into a downloadable press kit.
Oh, nice.
So that anybody that interviews you, they can just download that press kit. So you don't have to you don't have to worry about okay, well, here's my headshots and here's my bio and here's my press links and here's all the stuff. And there's 12 different emails back and forth. And you're not sure if you did it in Facebook Messenger, if you did it on text, or if you did it on email. Like, we have in-app messaging, we have in-app scheduling, we have in-app downloadable press kits, and you can discover and book the guests all within the site for free.
Okay, for free, yeah, because you had mentioned paying have guests on too, right?
So you pay the guests directly. So Guestio basically is the marketplace. The guest can jump in and set their own price for an interview.
Just so you know, just so our listeners know, it's not everybody charges to be on a podcast.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that do not charge to be on a podcast. So just don't think that you have to be paying your guests. Right. It's
just that the only thing there were a couple ones that already existed, but the thing that I looked at that was clearly a hole in the space is that the highest level people weren't using those sites because they don't need more bookings. They're already way overbooked. So the only way to get them on these sites is to guarantee that it's worth their time. The only way to guarantee that it's worth their time is to pay them.
Exactly. Of course, when you pay these people, if they're that much in demand, you're also going to get a lot of views, which is the hope for our listeners, either way.
And credibility into your show, for sure.
No, totally. Yeah, absolutely. So we all know that being an entrepreneur is a very lonely business. Okay. And until you build your team out and actually have some synchronicity going on, do you have any tips for our entrepreneurs listening of how to stay on track so they don't, say, this is just too much for me. I'm just going to go get a regular job. I really want to do this, but it's hard. You got to push yourself. So do you have any tips and takeaways for them?
Yeah, I love that question. This is a fantastic place to wrap up the episode because this is something that I think that trips up a lot of entrepreneurs, especially nowadays, because there's so much information that we get in, and there's so many. It's so easy to get pulled in a dozen different directions. But the way that I would explain it is that if you're an entrepreneur, you have to get extremely clear on the one thing that you do. People are too all over the place. They're too like, if you're a solopreneur, especially like you said, if you haven't built the teams, you haven't built the systems, you haven't done any of those things yet. If you're a solopreneur, you have to focus on what is the one thing that I do? Who is the one person that I serve? Like, narrow it down to the one thing that's going to help move the needle in your business. And that's what you have to do. You have to stay super focused on don't build out new products or offer stacks or services. You focus on one thing, you do that one thing extremely well, and you do that one thing for one person. I'm not saying just like one person. I'm saying one type of person.
Your audience. Yeah.
Avatar,
know your audience, right? Yeah.
Correct. Know who is the person that you help? How do you help them? And why are you different than everybody else who tries to help that person with that problem? If you can define those three things, then you'll probably be ahead of a lot of the other small businesses out there, because people just don't take the time to do it. They're just like, oh, I'm going to start this business, and then we got to have these products and that service and everything over here. And it's like, well, you never even got clear on the person that you're serving, the one main problem that you solve for that person, and what differentiates you. Why are they going to pick you? So if you figure out those things, I think that you'll be well on your way to beginning to take on some of those sales and get some revenue coming into your business, which will then allow you to be able to create systems and hire some more people so that you as the founder can go out and get more of those people to come into the business. But yeah, I think that too many people are they're all over the place. Like, oh yeah, we'll do that and we'll do that.
A lot of shiny objects out there. There really is, and
you start a marketing service and you're like, oh, we do Facebook ads and we do digital marketing and we do funnels and we do copy and we do like,
Yeah.
why
I
don't
mean,
you
I'm
just do
sure
one
you
thing?
get hit up all the time on LinkedIn. I mean, I must get 12 a day.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
this sounds good. Oh, that sounds good. And then all of a
right,
sudden you go
exactly.
through all your money.
And that's a fantastic way to get me to not buy your stuff. If you tell me that you do everything, then you probably do none of it really well.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me that, oh, we do email marketing and lead generation and we do Facebook ads and we do Google ads and we do copywriting and we do funnel building and we do website development, like I'm like, okay, well, I'm not using you for any of that stuff because odds are you're probably just kind of decent at all of it. And I want specialists. I want people who are really good at that thing, because when I'm looking for that one thing specifically, I want them to be good. So get the one thing. What's the one problem that you solve for the one type of person, and get really good at that one thing, and then you'll be able to start growing that business.
Awesome. And one last question, do you provide that on Guerrilla? Do you help them narrow it down?
Yes.
You do. Perfect.
Yeah. One thing that we do in our coaching is like, our coaching is different because we're not just telling you how to set up your microphone. We're trying to help you get set up with like the online business that you're creating, or or if you're a brick and mortar, like we work with a lot of entrepreneurs who have 7-figure businesses, but are trying to translate online, which happened a lot during COVID. And so my in-house coaching team will help you basically sit down, look at the revenue that you have, and figure out a plan to be able to take that and turn it into online revenue through the podcast and stuff.
Right on. Okay. And so what's the best way to get in touch with you? Your website?
Yes, ma'am. You just head over to travischappell.com. That usually houses most of the things that I'm doing. We need to redo that site after the software launch, to be honest with you, because there's a couple things that are changing, but you can still reach out to me over there at travischappell.com, or you can just email me directly, travis@travischappell.com. And I'll make the intros to my team and get you the necessary people to get you onboarded and work through the system.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. I learned a lot today. I'm sure that all of our listeners and viewers learned a lot as well. And thank you so much for being on my show.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks so much, Tina. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And we will see you next week. Have a great day, everybody.